This is Marco Reus, and you're listening to the Yellowwallpod.
To come here to Hakimi. Hakimi finds Torgan Hazard. Hazard's moment, Hazard's goal. His first for Dortmund is the breakthrough today. The quick free kick though has got to Hazard on the ball here for Guerrero. Went across goal, which was the right decision. And 2 goals in the blink of an eye has turned this game in a big way towards Borussia Dortmund.
Hello and welcome to episode 300 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's 2-1 win in the DFB-Pokal against Borussia Mönchengladbach, the league leaders. Then a very resounding 3-0 win over VfL Wolfsburg, which we very much appreciate for our 300th episode. But that's not all. There's more goodies for this episode. Bayern Munich were shellacked in Frankfurt 5-1, and there are some resulting consequences that we have to discuss. And of course, since this is now a Monday, tomorrow's game against Inter Milan in the Champions League, a crucial tie. I am looking forward to it. And to discuss all that and more joins me the one and only Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm doing well on this 300th episode day. How are you?
I'm doing very well myself. Now, little disclaimer, it's basically episode 300.1 or so, because what happened is that I did not immediately save my recording track on Audacity the last time we recorded episode 300 with Lars and Konstantin, and you, of course. And so what happened is that everything on episode 300 was deleted as my MacBook crashed. A rookie mistake, which I regret, of course, but I can only apologize and now move on. Because it's only us two, because I'm a little bit pressed for time today, and because editing just another track is easier than having to edit 3 other tracks. So Matthias, it's just you and me today, but I hope we can make up for that in positivity, because it's been a very excellent week, I must say, for Dortmund. And with that, I guess we can start with the 2-1 win in the cup. I think Dortmund did very well to react to the Revier Derby. We saw, for example, Jakob Brun-Larsen up front. This is something I liked the decision, because Lucien Favre talked about the lack of vertical runs after the Revier Derby. And I think a couple of elements also to tire out the opposition like that we finally saw from Brun-Larsen. Obviously, he did not score a goal or had big chances, but nevertheless, I thought it was positive. And then, of course, we saw Julian Brandt on the number 10, which I think is his best, or one of his best positions. Maybe he can play like a 10-8 hybrid. But I thought that Dortmund drew the right consequences from their scoreless derby and plugged it into that midweek cup match. And it worked out well, I must say. So I was actually quite positive overall with the game. What were your thoughts?
Well, overall, very, very positive. Dortmund, the first half was a little tough at times, which I'm not overly surprised about, because we can't forget the quality of the opposition. Borussia Mönchengladbach at that point, and still today, top of the Bundesliga, very well coached and played very, very well. But what I enjoyed in the first half was the significantly higher levels of energy, pressing, positivity, vertical runs, as you talked about. So it was a completely different Dortmund than we had seen in the previous few matches, where they were very passive at times. The good thing is, in the second half, it kind of turned around after Gladbach got the lead. And it's almost like then Dortmund really woke up and played even more positively, because there was a little lull after halftime, which was also repeated against Wolfsburg, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But then the Brandt show happened, and it was really important that not only that Dortmund played positively, but that they continued to play positively even once they got the 2-1 lead, because they were like, well, a 1-goal lead isn't enough. We want to make sure this match is done in 90 minutes. Nobody needs extra time, a penalty shootout, given that they still have, that they're playing every 2-3 days at this point. So overall, very, very good to see. A lot of positive signs. I think the lessons were learned out of the previous weeks. And to me, especially now, because we obviously did not have the Wolfsburg match to think about when we recorded this originally last week. But now taking both those matches into account, it's almost like maybe Favre, I don't know, was conserving Dortmund's energy to a point, and now it's like, all right, let's go, because last season, obviously Dortmund ran out of gas in the tank after a while, plus then injuries happened, there was lack of depth. The depth is much higher, the energy was higher now in these last 2 matches, but also against Gladbach, which Dortmund, they didn't blow Gladbach away, but I still believe they were, over the course of the full 90 minutes, the better side. They created significantly more chances. Gladbach were pretty passive themselves, very solid defensively, but going forward really didn't offer a lot, except for the goal. And I could think of one other big chance, and after that, I can't really remember, but it's also been almost a week.
So much
and I'm old. So, but to me, Dortmund definitely deserved the victory. They were the better side over the course of the entire match, and just thankful moving on in the cup to play against, obviously a team that we know very well out of the cup.
Yeah, Werder Bremen. Dortmund obviously have a lot of prominent history in the cup, but it's also the team that dumped them out of the competition last season, and Dortmund will head to the Weserstadion. I don't know if it's the 4th or the 5th February, and 2 weeks later they will meet again at the Weserstadion in the Bundesliga then. So it's a little bit like the 2 duels against Gladbach, which Dortmund of course both won. What I liked about this game is that we finally saw Weigl next to Witsel in defensive midfield. I thought that helped make the connections to Hazard and Brandt and Sancho, of course, the front four in general. And I think that was a little bit the key for Dortmund to have a more positive ball progression, because in this game, Nico Schulz and Lukas Piszczek didn't play their best football. And I have to say, Dortmund struggle right now a lot to build over the wings. I think there's still a severe lack of automatism, that when you pass to the fullback and trying to run your build-up sequence, that the balls sometimes get stuck because your fullback gets pressed by the opponent, and then it kind of becomes a very nervy affair, and you just never find the space behind that opposition fullback or wingback or whatever. And I hope it improves in the future, but in the meantime, it's nice that Dortmund actually found a way through the middle, which is more effective anyway. So that was very positive, and of course, someone who had a lot to do with that was Danaxel Zagadou, who was in for Mats Hummels, who had a stomach flu. And Zagadou played very well, I think, except for defending the goal, but I wouldn't completely put all the blame on him there, even though he was drawn a little bit out of position. But it was just a very good run of Thuram. So what I liked about Zagadou in this game, and obviously something we've seen before, is that he had the confidence to take the ball with his feet and dribble forward and break lines, and overall his distribution was very well. And the partnership with Manuel Akanji also worked very well. So that overall to me was a very positive performance and a highlight, because it helps for the future to know that you can slot Danaxel Zagadou in there and he can perform. I obviously cannot foresee whether he will meet this requirement with consistency, but for the time being, there is this note if Mats Hummels is out or should need a rest, that you can plug Zagadou in there next to Akanji, and it works quite smoothly, especially with the triangle of Weigl and Witsel. So I was very impressed. And then of course, Dortmund were, overall the game wasn't, on the edge of your seat stuff. It was two clubs trying to neutralize each other. And then really in the second half for a long time, I really grew frustrated because Dortmund were not really playing on the front foot, and Gladbach gained more and more control, and eventually they scored. And we've questioned Dortmund character in recent weeks a lot, and wondered to when they, start to play with urgency and start to fight. And I think maybe the fact that the DFB Pokal is such a special competition that you have basically no other option than to play forward. I know you could apply the same logic to any Bundesliga game, but I feel like in the mind of a player, maybe the knockout competition does something to you, that they finally just basically said screw it, and basically said the desire to win is now bigger than the fear of losing. And this is for a first time in a very long time how they played. And it didn't take Dortmund long to actually take the lead. And unleashed Julian Brandt is something we obviously want to see. And those two goals were, also very nice. Obviously the first one I think had 2 deflections, but the second one was just a very good cross and a very good header. And also, consistent pressure up front. And I don't know if you want to talk about depth and Dortmund playing with more energy than the opponent now or later. But it's just good to see that Dortmund in all these midweek games can shift into another gear, while a team like Gladbach right now cannot.
No, I agree. It's good to see, and I think we can talk about it now when we talk about Wolfsburg as far as energy and depth goes, because it's a theme that carried on seamlessly into the next match. So I think we've probably covered everything we need to cover as a recap of the DFB Pokal match at this point.
Yeah, okay, then I guess we can move on, and I'd say it now because Dortmund, I think, made 6 changes to the team that started in the Revier Derby. According to Lucien Favre, I actually didn't check that, but they also made 5 changes on Saturday to the team that started on Wednesday. And I think now we're finally starting to see the big advantage that Dortmund have in terms of squad depth over, I would say, most teams in the Bundesliga, especially Bayern Munich, who right now have a bit of an injury malaise, but they also start with a very thin squad. But obviously other teams, just because of their financial constraints, except for Leipzig, cannot compete with that. A team like Gladbach or Wolfsburg certainly cannot. And we already saw it in the last 15 to 20 minutes against Schalke, that Dortmund had something left in the tank, while Schalke obviously had not. That is also a consequence of their high octane pressing style, and Dortmund were lucky to be still in the game. But nevertheless, same, I think, is fair to say, happened against Gladbach. And then, of course, Wolfsburg. Julian Weigl literally said after the Wolfsburg match that they just felt that the opponents were tiring out, and in the second half just couldn't close the gaps as quickly anymore. And that helped Dortmund to, I thought, was the best half since the Barcelona game. So just very happy. And if we look at the lineup to, for example, give Witsel a rest and play Dahoud and Weigl, I thought was a key for the win, not only because I really wanted Witsel to have a rest, but also it's good to see that Favre finally trusts Dahoud, and I sometimes wonder why he didn't sooner. But here we are with a whole new double pivot for, I think, 3 straight games, and it worked out quite well for Dortmund, and you really saw that Witsel, that Weigl and Dahoud create the connections between defense and offense, which is something that Dortmund obviously struggled with, especially with the Delaney-Witsel double pivot, but also from the get-go. And I think that was quite different than the Gladbach game, but maybe with the confidence gained from that match, Dortmund actually pressed Wolfsburg very high, and I think the the attitude and mindset overall of the player type that Dahoud is and Weigl also helped really to keep the pressure on. I don't remember Wolfsburg even really having a touch beyond the halfway line in the first 10 minutes or so, just because Dortmund were so aggressive. Obviously, you cannot keep that tenacity up endlessly, but it's still a good sign that Dortmund just come out of the gate and pummel an opponent and really make life difficult for them and regain control as soon as you lose the ball. So that was, to me, very positive and something that I think shows us that the Dortmund team, after a dip and a struggle, is hopefully now on the right path and on the right direction. Obviously, they will have to prove that in the upcoming games, but nevertheless, to me, just a very good sign also of Lucien Favre to make these decisions, because we have slated him quite a bit on this podcast, but I really have to say in the last 2 games he got it really right, and maybe with the exception for playing Royce as a number 9 instead of Götze. But that also opens another question. And I'll hand it to you, Matthias. Do you think that seeing Brandt in the number 10 spot made Lucien Favre say, okay, I have Royce and I have Brandt here, and in the past he played them maybe both up top or so, but now he says, okay, Julian Brandt goes into the number 10 and Marco Reus play up top, even though we all know Marco Reus loves the 10, hates the 9. To me, it was quite a significant decision, but I wonder if that will stick.
Well, that's a tough one, but you know, given that Favre, when things are going well, he doesn't really like to change a winning team. Obviously, this formula of Brandt and the number 10 is working out. If you think back over the last few seasons, though, obviously Royce last season was great in that number 10 position, but he always previously came in from the left wing. I still believe that's probably his best position, most suited to his directness and his speed and stuff like that. He's not a playmaker, never was. He's one who finishes off plays and creates havoc when needed. And so I personally would rather, I think when everyone's fit, you're not going to see Royce as that 9 slot. You'll see Paco and Götze. But then you have that rotational option of putting Royce in the 10 or Brandt in the 10 or moving Royce to the left side because you've got Hazard and Sancho. And I'm still not convinced of Hakimi as a winger. I personally would rather not see him there.
Although he had a really good game against Wolfsburg.
He had a good game, but he was still making so many unforced errors. But I guess if I would rather a player have the unforced errors and errant passes in the opponent's third than my own third. If you lose the ball high up the pitch and you're playing any form of gegenpressing, you have a chance. If you lose it pretty badly in your own half, things can turn hairy pretty fast against a good team. But to answer your question, I think this just solidifies the idea of we have options, and we can't forget Marco Reus is injury prone over the last few seasons. He's not getting any younger, whereas Brandt is significantly younger, doesn't have quite the injury issue history that Reus does. So this just gives him more options. I don't think Reus is going to get pushed out of the team because of this, but I think Favre is seeing enough evidence that maybe when all things are considered and everyone's healthy and you don't have to think too much about rotation in some matches and it's a good quality opposition, I think you can play Brandt in the 10, Reus on the left, Sancho on the right, and then you've got Paco or Götze up top. And the nice thing is you've got a Hazard, you've got a Guerrero, anybody like that you can swap in as well. There's just so many options, but I still believe when Reus is fully fit and healthy, you play him not as a 9, and maybe not as a 10 now. More back into the role that he's kind of played his entire career, which is a guy coming off the left wing.
I mean, we have to always say this with an asterisk right now, because it's obvious that Marco Reus is not in full form. I don't know when he picked up the ankle injury, but he had to get off in the 27th minute, and against Gladbach, he was out with muscular problems. Before then, he wasn't at 100% because he had the flu. So, I would tread a bit lightly and obviously, when Marco Reus is in his best form, there is no way around them. But nevertheless, I would say it is a positive thing if there is something like an emancipation from Marco Reus, because Dortmund sometimes are very over-reliant on him. And there are games where Marco Reus, because of the type of player he is just not very effective. Sometimes he lacks the connections with his teammates in midfield, just because he has not the technical, well, I wouldn't say technical ability, but he's just a different type of player than Julian Brandt, who rotates very quickly on the spot and dribbles a little bit better than Marco Reus. Marco Reus likes to turn around and run forward, but he does not dribble on close space as well as Brandt does, I would say. So just having a different type of player sometimes help Dortmund to unlock opponents when Marco Reus just seems AWOL in the game. I don't want to diss on Marco Reus, but I just feel like this is just a pitfall of his style and the player type he is. So overall, that is positive, and I think Julian Brandt might be the future as the number 10 in Dortmund. So it's not a bad problem to have, to be honest. And Julian Brandt is only just arriving and finding his feet. So overall, another positive performance. And I have to say, I thought Dortmund also just looked a little bit sharper and better after the 27th minute when Mario Götze came on, because I thought the construct just worked a little bit better with the front four of Hazard, Brandt, Hakimi and Götze than with Reus up front. And yeah, overall, it was a first half that was quite drawn out, just because, as you mentioned in the preview pod that never aired, that Wolfsburg are, a very good defensive side, and Dortmund had a lot of problems, I would say, to really find gaps. But still, I thought it was positive, the amount of possession Dortmund had, where they had it, and just the way that they managed to hand the ball to Hazard, to Brandt, and whatever in the final and middle third. And yeah, just play it forward and have some space in some situations. Obviously, the last pass never came off, but it's to me it's a sea change opposed to what Dortmund showed in other games. Now, obviously, these are all home games, so I'd like to see this the same on the road at some point. Hopefully in Munich soon. But we can talk about that on Thursday, of course. So back to that Wolfsburg game, and I think after Mensah had the chip at the bar in the first half, then Dortmund really took over in the second half, especially after that first goal.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, what you saw in that match was what we had said. Wolfsburg score as many goals as Paderborn. Paderborn play more attacking than Wolfsburg. The only difference is Paderborn conceded like 22 or 26 or something like that goals in the same time that Wolfsburg has conceded 5. But it did showcase Wolfsburg had a couple of good chances. There's no denying that. But it showed their ineptitude at scoring goals, which if I was Glasner, who was definitely, after the match in the press conference, was very big on saying how much they gifted Dortmund goals and basically gifted Dortmund the win, which is complete bullshit. It would be a concern for me that it's like, okay, well, if the opponent scores a goal or two, how are we going to get back into this if we can't? Now, it reminds me a little bit of Tedesco's Schalke, where if Schalke got an early goal, they would just shut it down and the opponent couldn't get through. That's kind of how Wolfsburg is operating under Glasner. But if the opposition scores a goal or two, then Schalke under Tedesco was useless. And I think that's the same thing that's going to happen to Wolfsburg. I think you're going to see Wolfsburg precipitously start to drop, because in the next few matches, I think Wolfsburg play against Leverkusen and Frankfurt, two teams that like to score, especially Frankfurt. Granted, Frankfurt aren't going to get as easy an opponent as Bayern München every week. So Wolfsburg actually knows how to defend and has defenders. Usually starts more defenders than Bayern currently have on their entire roster. But that being said, that's the issue that Wolfsburg have, and Dortmund did exactly what Leipzig did to them just a few days earlier, where Leipzig scored 6, and Dortmund could have scored 6. There's no doubt about it. There were a few really good opportunities that Dortmund could have scored, and it's hitting them in quick transition. I'm not a big John Anthony Brooks fan. As a U.S. men's national team guy, I'm not a fan of his. He's just too slow. He's too error prone. His positional play is questionable. But under Glasner, who's a very good coach, way better than any coach Brooks has had in his career so far, including the U.S. men's national team, his positional play is better. But him and Bruma still aren't quick to turn guys, and they're not used to playing a high line, high press, which they tried at times against Dortmund, and that's when they got cut out. It's kind of like against Leipzig. When the transition happened quickly, Wolfsburg were just all over the place. They could not reorganize fast enough. And you saw that here. Every time Dortmund picked up the tempo, they were likely to score. That was the first goal. The second goal, they just played that free kick really fast, and Wolfsburg weren't set. And that speed kind of hurt them, as well as a few other transitional opportunities that Dortmund had, where Wolfsburg just looked unsure with that pace. You know, even their midfield isn't that pacey. Yeah, they've got some pacey attackers. I'm a fan of Roussillon at left back, even though he didn't play that great in this match. So overall, everything kind of came together. Dortmund played to their strengths and exploited some of the weaknesses that Wolfsburg have, and deservedly won the match, and maybe could have scored a few more. Yes, so Wolfsburg could have scored a goal or two, according to Oliver Glasner, and I agree with him there. But overall, Dortmund were definitely the better side.
So, at least 2 points. Number one, as you just said, Dortmund played to their strengths. This is something that they didn't always do in past games. And Oliver Glasner basically said in the press conference after the game that the difference between his side and the absolute top teams is that when John Anthony Brooks headed that ball back into the feet of Achraf Hakimi after basically Marvin Hitz played a long ball forward, you had 4 Dortmund players running at high speed at Wolfsburg's backline, and he said there are a couple of Wolfsburg players that were just prancing and they were not aware. Of course, that's a little bit down to the fact that Wolfsburg were trying to eke into this game and actually were on a pathway to getting a little bit better. And so their setup between the back line and the defensive midfield line, the first and second line, was a little bit stretched where Dortmund could run into. But nevertheless, as you just pointed out, Dortmund were actually running in full sprint. There were 4 attacking players and they were all just flying forward. And Wolfsburg really had trouble to defend that because, of course you would, it's Dortmund at full speed. It's really hard to defend that. So that is just something I want to point out again, because Dortmund finally showed the urgency. That's all I'm asking for. The urgency to just run forward and try your best and not step on the ball and pass it to the defensive midfielder and whatnot. Just run forward, carry it, and then pick out the pass. And I think Achraf Hakimi did an excellent job to pick out Hazard, who then finally scored his first goal for Dortmund, which obviously is also one of the positive stories here. And he did it very expertly, cut inside, then aimed for the short corner, very hard to save. And Hazard goal, I think we will see more often. We might have seen it almost, well, it wasn't a replica, but the double back heel combination, which was just chef's kiss. Like, mwah. That was just the Dortmund that we all want to see, and that's the positive thing, and it really makes me upbeat about hopefully the next 2 games. That the Spielfreude is back, as we all say in German. Matthias, you can now explain, since you are the more experienced of the 2 in linguistics, since you've been speaking English for a longer time, what Spielfreude means, because that will be the episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the creative flair, the enjoyment of the game is back. That kind of, we also say Leichtigkeit. I mean, that's actually what everybody said, Spielfreude and Leichtigkeit. So it's playing more openly, more attacking, more positively, with less pressure. So they're not bogged down by their own psyche. So all of that put together, it just enforces the creativity. And that's, in a nutshell, what Spielfreude really means.
Yeah, it's you made want to call it Joga Bonito or whatever, just the flair, and it really means the fun of the game, or having fun while playing the game. Play fun, if you will. I don't know. But I think it becomes clear and everyone knows what we are talking about. So yeah, that just makes me very positive. And Dortmund, they scored a goal and then they weren't like, okay, we have to track back and retreat in our shell around the own box. Instead, Dortmund kept the pressure on and really pummeled Wolfsburg for the next 20 minutes and terrorized them. And eventually Rafael Guerreiro with a very beautiful goal, assisted by Hazard. So that to me was very positive. And of course, Wolfsburg had chances because Dortmund left them space here and there because Dortmund were themselves on the front foot. And I prefer that so much over what we saw from Dortmund in the past where, the expected goals averaged, I think 3.21, I think it was, if you extrapolate how Dortmund play when they are 1 goal up, over 90 minutes, they would concede 3 goals and would score themselves very, very few. And here we have it differently. Yes, your opponent still creates chances, but you are yourself on the front foot. And, if Wolfsburg don't score theirs, there's a very good chance Dortmund makes it 3 and 4. And, in the end, they made it 3-0. So it's just a sight to behold. And of course, again, just the sheer amount of talent and depth that Dortmund have, which is finally coming to fruition, and something I think will really help them down the stretch, especially after the next international break, where a lot of other teams might get tired. I really hope that Dortmund manage to reserve that rotational masterclass, because Favre is doing that well right now. He is... you said Favre doesn't like to change a winning team, but right now he's doing it anyway. So I'm very happy. After a lot of criticism toward Favre, I really have to tip my hat off. I think he's doing a well job. He's picking the right teams, and Dortmund are, they're working hard for that Spielfreude to come back. So I'm just glad. Obviously, was everything perfect? No, far from it. But this is, at least the positivity we can ask for. And yes, Dortmund are, struggling in many ways. And tactically, it's not all brilliant just yet. But at least there's some positivity. And I think, having our 300th episode, this is more upbeat than, how we were after Dortmund really lost a terrible game against Inter and then had the scoreless draw against Schalke, which was all just ugh. So I'm way more pleased with this, and just seeing Torgen Hazard and Julian Brandt finally do well is just good, because there were synergies, there was team chemistry, and there was urgency, all the things that I want. And in the end, it was also a nice story that Mario Götze could finally score a penalty, or get a goal. I don't know if I would have given that. I probably wouldn't have given it, but the rules are so that you can just aim for the hand, and apparently that's a penalty. I don't know what do you think about that, but I didn't care. I was just happy for Götze.
Well, I mean, to me, it's a penalty. Bruma said I didn't play it with my hand was. My arm was tucked in, but he actually stuck it out, and that's when it happened to hit his hand. To me, that's a handball.
It's a super replay, it's not an aware movement, not a conscious move you make with your arm. It's just, with all the dynamic that just happens. If you play in super slow-mo, you see the arm going out, but I don't think that's he wasn't trying to block the ball with his arm or anything. So, but this is the new rule. So here we are. It's funny how Schalke just can't get a penalty when the same happens in their opposing box. But I don't care.
To me, it's a penalty because his hand, which you're not allowed to use in the sport, prevented the ball from getting crossed into the box. It was extended from his body. Did he mean to do it? No. Does it matter? No. To me, that's the definition of what a handball is. You gained an advantage by using your hand, whether you did it consciously or not, it doesn't matter to me. It was extended from the body. It blocked the ball from going where it was intended to go. Ergo, I consider that a handball. To me, that's more of a handball than some other stuff that's been called or not called. So I have absolutely no problem with it. Would it have annoyed me if it happened on the other end? Sure. But to me, it's still a handball, no matter who does it. But what kind of makes it so interesting is just, was it a week ago or so, where Mainz and Köln had the match, and it was basically the same type of situation, even though the arm was well extended from the body. But the DFL or DFB, I don't remember, came out afterwards and said, yeah, that should have been called as a handball penalty. So for me, what Bruma did, it's a handball, it's a penalty, and good for Götze to score a deserved third goal.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Dortmund really deserved to score another. Now, obviously, Dortmund were also riding their luck a little bit that Wolfsburg and Weghorst didn't score in the later stages of the game. Marvin Hitz had a couple of very good saves to make. But that's what he's there for. And again, it's very positive, I find, that when Roman Bürki is already fit enough to play and he's on the bench, that Lucien Favre can say, no, hold on. You just had a flu, and yes, you trained for 2 days, but I don't think that's enough for you to be at 100%. So I'm just gonna stick you on the bench and keep Marvin Hitz in goal, who I think is still unbeaten as a goalkeeper this season. So yeah, very just positive stuff that Dortmund really have a depth that they can rely on. You know, having a lot of players in your squad is one thing, but then having reliable depth is another thing. And I think Marvin Hitz is doing his job quite well as the number 2 keeper, and I assume Roman Bürki will be back in goal for the Inter game. But you know, again, I'm just happy, especially that Axel Witsel finally got a break, because I think it was a mistake to play him so many games already. You know, just from what Dortmund have learned in the last season, yes, Witsel is a player that has lots of stamina and can play a lot of games, but I still think that fatigue is also subject to Witsel. He is human after all, and he's in his 30s, so it's just good that Favre finally trusted the hood and made it stick, because it was an excellent move. It helped Dortmund to win the game and was a key. And now we have a somewhat more fresh Witsel for the Inter and probably Bayern games. So I think with the last 2 lineups, Dortmund won a lot, just in terms of takeaways. And yeah, I do wonder, you know, the fullback situation is maybe the only thing where Dortmund aren't completely sure what to do. You know, Schulz and Guerrero and Hakimi are rotating a little bit on that left back spot. I don't think Favre is super happy yet with what Schulz is doing. And Guerrero certainly had a good game against Gladbach, but we'll see what happens against Inter. But it was also nice that our 300th episode lined up with Lukas Piszczek's 300th Bundesliga game, or I think it was, right? So,
yeah, it was his 300th. It was Lucien Favre's birthday as well. And I just watched before we recorded the press conference for the Inter match, where Lucien Favre had a very interesting anecdote about Piszczek that a Polish reporter asked. When Piszczek got the offer to go to Dortmund, he called Favre and asked if he should go. And Lucien Favre told him, if need be, walk there. Go there as fast as you can, go to Dortmund. So I guess we have to thank Lucien Favre for pointing Piszczek in the right direction.
Which is crazy is that they realized, as the question was asked, that this whole thing happened 10 years ago. That to me is just, you know, it's just bonkers how time passes. I can't believe that Piszczek has been at Dortmund for a decade now. I don't know about you, but wow. You know, just taking
Crazy.
a moment to appreciate that, and what an amazing player he has been, so reliable over all these years. I'm just grateful for the loyalty and the ups and downs he went through with the club, and I really hope there's another up for him to celebrate.
I agree. I mean, they said that November or this month, he will be playing his last match for Poland as an international. So I don't know how many more seasons he really has left in him. But he surprised us more than once by all of a sudden playing really, really well again, even after injuries. So, hopefully, he gets a great, I'm not going to say final season. Who knows if this is going to be his last season at Dortmund, but I think he's going to retire as a Dortmund player. So it would be great if, there could be yet another trophy for his collection, as a Dortmund player, by the end of at least this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was on Instagram or so, but somewhere I saw his daughter, and she is also not all grown up, but I remember when was just a baby. Now she's also like 6-7 years old or so. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's crazy how fast time moves. So here we all are, and Lukas Piszczek now has 300 league games, I think, for Dortmund. Or was it in general? I'm not sure, but
it was in general. It was all Bundesliga games, but of course the majority he played at Dortmund. And we can't forget when he came to Hertha, where Lucien Favre was his manager. He was a striker.
Yeah, I'm very glad that Lucien Favre realized that Lukas Piszczek isn't a striker. Yes, Jürgen Klopp gets a lot of credit for then making it stick, but I think Favre was the man that really put Piszczek at that right back spot, and it worked out. So now, of course, Dortmund had a very positive evening or afternoon against Wolfsburg, and they're back in second place behind Gladbach, who managed to win the derby, if you want to call it that, against Bayer Leverkusen. And another team had a very positive afternoon, which was RB Leipzig, who shellacked Mainz 8-0, which was quite impressive. And it seems Leipzig themselves have overcome their little bit of a dip they had, where they didn't, get too many points. We'll see if that high scoring blip is just a blip, or whether they can perform on a more consistent level in the next games. But I would say the best afternoon of all teams had Eintracht Frankfurt. 5-1 against Bayern Munich. And I don't know about you, Matthias, but the level of Schadenfreude was quite high, especially after that foul in the 9th minute by Jerome Boateng, who obviously pointed out correctly to the referee that it was not inside the box. And VAR had to clarify that. And then he was sent off with a straight red, which is the correct decision. It means he will not be featuring next Saturday when Dortmund play at the Allianz Arena, which I think is the biggest boost you can have, because, of course, Bayern right now are very thinned out at the center-back position. I think David Alaba right now is playing center-back for them, and Alphonso Davies is playing left-back. And Benjamin Pavard, who is also out of form, is playing the other center-back. So it's really not looking good for them, and they have one other option, which is Javi Martinez. But as Dortmund fans know, Martinez is probably the Bayern player that's most prone to individual mistakes against Dortmund. So I would welcome him as well. So yeah, I obviously don't know what the new coach will make, but if you're without Lucas Hernandez and without Niklas Süle, then you have a bit of a problem if you're Bayern Munich. So this at least is a big advantage for Dortmund. Now, in terms of levels of Schadenfreude, I don't know how far my Schadenfreude goes that Bayern sacked Kovac on Sunday instead of, let's say, after the international break or after the game against Dortmund, because traditionally I feel Dortmund do not play well against teams that just had a new coach. So we'll see about that. But overall, what do you make of the burning tree in Munich?
Well, it's been burning for a while, and I did watch the Bochum Pokal game against Bayern. It was enjoyable, and I feel really bad for. I've never said this before. I really feel bad for VfL Bochum.
I personally have a lot of sympathy for Bochum.
It's because the last time they were a consistent force in the Bundesliga, you were 5 years old. So the rivalry that used to kind of be there between the also ran Borussia Dortmund against the also ran VfL Bochum, if we go back to the 80s and early 90s, that's long been gone. But
I will say this: the last season of Bochum, as far as I know, had to rehabilitate Mohamed Zidane and Lucas Barrios in one game, because I think Lucas Barrios had a bit of a slump, but Bochum were there to basically be the slump buster for both these players. So that was very positive. So while you may just laugh it off as me being still a kid back then, but I wasn't that young anymore, and also Bochum helped Dortmund to, recatch their form. So it was an important slump-buster team for Dortmund. Some called it the 13th home match. So the 18th home match, of course. I'm sorry. So because Bochum obviously is just like a subway right away. And I must admit, I actually really like going there just for a game of football, because it's just a very romantic ground. It just feels like football, and the bratwurst there is very good. So if you are in Dortmund and the schedule allows it for you to catch a Bochum game, please do, because the tickets are cheap and the bratwurst is good, and well, the football isn't great, but at least you get some good old Ruhrpott atmosphere. So, if I'll be the trip advisor, please go ahead and do that.
No, I mean, you're right. The football's not great. You can't forget Bochum is battling against relegation in the Zweite Bundesliga and almost beat Bayern in the cup. So they asked Manuel Neuer at that point, how are things? And he's like, they're pretty bad. And then they asked him again after Bayern losing 5-1 to Frankfurt. He's like, it's going to be a really interesting week. Anecdotally, Bayern's second team also shipped 5 goals this weekend, losing to SV Meppen in the third league 5-3. So it was not a good day at the Sebener Straße, whether you were a first team or a second team member. But that being said, I feel bad for Niko Kovac. He's a likable guy. I think he's a good coach for a mid-table side. You need to be a special kind of someone to deal with not just Bayern as, the Bayern fan base who, expect a lot of things, but it's the Bayern fan base. Come on. Okay. It's more about you're dealing with the egos in the locker room and the egos in the boardroom, so to speak. I mean, you're dealing with Rummenigge and Hoeneß. You've got probably, I would say, if not one of the most incompetent sporting directors in the Bundesliga in Hasan Bratzo Salihamidzic, because at the end of the day, none of them did Kovac any favors in building a team that suits his style of play or getting him enough depth to deal with the strain of a Bayern season, because they're always going to be playing in 3 competitions. And you can see it right now. You sell Hummels and you're like, okay, we're still okay. We're not going to get rid of Boateng now because nobody wants his bloated contract. But we've got Süle, we've got Luka Hernandez, and a very overrated Benjamin Pavard. And then Süle out for the season, Lucas Hernandez out for a long time, and now Boateng is going to be out for at least one match. I don't know if he's going to be out for multiple matches. I don't know that. But you've got to rely on Benjamin Pavard, who is, I forget who tweeted it out this week and said, could it be that he's the most overrated defender in the Bundesliga? I mean, he did play for a bad Stuttgart side and didn't play very well for them. So
yeah, I think there was sort of in the tune of, I think ESPN was questioning whether Robert Lewandowski is the most underrated striker. And I would say yes.
Who's going to get an operation soon too?
Yes.
But
he won't miss a game, but he will have groin surgery.
Yeah, groin surgery. And it says he could miss 7 to 10 days. Ideally, they do it now, so he misses the next 7 to 10 days. But it sounds like they're going to do it basically during that international break, so he won't miss any time. I consider that if he's in enough pain that they need an operation, to me, you're playing with fire, Bayern. If you're going to be like, well, let's just give it another week or two and then do an operation to help him out. You're risking more injury, but here's the crazy thing. A guy who's been playing with an injury has still scored 14 goals in the Bundesliga so far this season. It's pretty phenomenal what he's doing, but I don't want to, be on a hype train for Lewandowski because Lord knows he doesn't do it. And honestly, he just annoys the hell out of me because he's constantly screaming, bitching, and moaning on the pitch. And it's really annoying to watch.
It annoyed me that he, against Bochum, felt it necessary to, do a blatant dive. I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was in 2012 or so when Bochum played Bayern in the German Cup, and Bochum were also leading then, or it was a draw, and Bayern only won because Ian Robben had a blatant dive in the box and won a penalty. Completely crazy decision, but it's just annoying because you have this underdog that is really fighting, as good as they can, and then you have these world stars, and they feel like it's not beneath them to just blatantly dive and try to cheat themselves ahead in these games. It just annoys me. It just rubs me the wrong way. So just very annoying. But continue. Why do you think it was the right decision to can Kovac now?
Well, I mean, his position had become untenable. Even if you're down to 10 men, they completely capitulated against Eintracht Frankfurt. He has obviously lost the locker room a long time ago. And at Bayern, it's just ask Carlo Ancelotti. You lose that egomaniac of a locker room, you're done. You're toast. They have no problem just not trying quite as hard. Now, they're not going to throw a match to get a manager out, but they're definitely not going to try as hard. They're going to complain the whole time. They're not really going to be into it. So his position had become untenable. Now, obviously, they couldn't fire him in the summer because he just won the double. That would just look stupid. But at this point, he was set up for failure. I don't believe willingly by the boardroom, but by the lack of transfers, a lack of depth that they brought is an issue. And then obviously many of the players, especially the Ur-Bayern, be it a Boateng, okay, he's not an Ur-Bayer, but you know what I mean. Boateng and Müller, Hummels also when he was still there. So ironically, three of the players, or not ironically, got kicked out by Löw. Really worked against him, and I think probably a few more. I'm not that into the Bayern scene because there's only so much of it I can take. So I'm not 100% sure. I just feel bad for Niko Kovac. I think the timing, it is what it is. I don't think you could have picked the perfect time, maybe waited an extra week or two, but I think they were worried looking at the schedule. They've got Champions League and then they have Dortmund. If we don't pull the plug now, we may be really far behind in all of our plans for this season with winning the title and stuff like that. So we'll pull the plug now. Hansi Flick, I think, is a very good coach. I think everything is set up that Ten Hag will take over eventually from Ajax, be it this season or next season. Obviously, all the cards are in his and his agent's hands at this point. They have all the power. And Bayern, it would be a smart appointment to pick him because it kind of follows that Pep Guardiola tree that they had until Ancelotti came and everything just kind of fell apart. So I still think it works in Dortmund's favor because everything is a little unknown, a little chaotic. Hansi Flick, I think, is a good coach. He gets his opportunity now. Obviously, he was Joachim Löw's right-hand man when Germany won the World Cup. And so, he's competent. He knows the sport. He's tactically astute from everything I've read and heard. That being said, they're still dealing with, Pavard and whoever else lines up next to him in defense. So, it doesn't matter who the coach is. It's going to be a tough ask, especially because Dortmund's trajectory is up, whereas Bayern has been slumping for a while. I don't think you're going to get a new manager bounce, as it were, just by plugging Hansi Flick, who's been there this season already, into the starting role.
Like he is new. He has been involved in the decision-making process so far. So unless he blew the whistle and basically lined out every mistake that Kovac made and how he could have done it all better, I'm not entirely sure he will be the instant upgrade, but of course, the effect will be there, and so far that players no longer have an alibi. I think that still counts, even in professional sport, that, you no longer have Kovac who, takes all the blame. I think now the focus is more on the team again, so that should help Bayern, and, I don't know, I feel a little bit uneasy. I would have preferred Dortmund to play against the Niko Kovac Bayern than against the Hansi Flick Bayern. I must be honest here. But nevertheless, it's nice to see a little bit turmoil at the Sebener Straße. And, on the other hand, it's never good that they actually react when things aren't going, perfectly. I mean, right now, Bayern are 4 points off the lead, but I don't think their focus really is on the Bundesliga as much. I think it's more of the overall development. And of course, the Champions League title. This is, I would assume, is what Bayern are aiming for. And of course, what I think happened is, I think Sportbild broke it first that Kovac would get an ultimatum of 2 more games, but then obviously he met with the board. And I think when Bayern says, okay, you get 2 more games, and if the results are okay, you can continue. I think this is where Kovac himself realized, okay, this is untenable for me, and I'll just go. Because, obviously, you will want to be graded on a longer development and not just 2 games. So this is, for him, it was pretty much the time to, I don't know, some wrote that he resigned, others say it was a collaborated decision, whatever. It's just nice to see that Bayern are struggling immensely severely and also somewhat predictively. Now we all have to hope that Hansi Flick doesn't turn it completely around and make them into a team that they certainly can be with the squad they have. I think Bayern are lacking somewhat of a tactical flexibility. I think a lot of teams have it very easy to see what Bayern are doing and to look through that shape. So, this will obviously, or might be a bit tougher with Hansi Flick, but, who knows? I don't see, someone installing a excellent positional play anytime soon and, create more urgency in that team. But, now would be the time for Dortmund to twist the knife even more, if you ask me. But, we will obviously discuss all that in the next episode on Thursday after the Champions League, which I think, unless you have anything else to say on Bayern Munich and their struggles, other than it was nice to see them lose so heavily, I think we can move on to the Champions League.
I agree. I think we've dedicated enough time to them. If you want to know more about Bayern, I'm sure you can find 1,000,001 resources for that.
Yeah, so do I. So, Dortmund play Inter in the second game, and Dortmund now are in 3rd place in the Champions League. I think they are trailing Inter by 1 point. And the good news is, at least from my observation, Dortmund played terribly in the first leg. However, I wasn't also quite impressed with Inter, to be honest. Yes, they won the game, but it wasn't like I was blown away by the performance. So, given that Dortmund have improved and the newfound urgency and the fact that it's a home game, maybe that can translate that Dortmund are now a little bit better than in the first game, and Inter are maybe a little bit worse or the same. I don't know. You have probably observed them a little better and can answer that question now for me.
And I think when you said point, I think you meant by one goal, because obviously they have the same points, but it's a goal difference of one goal in the Champions League table between Dortmund and Inter. Having watched the 3 matches from Inter since the Champions League tie, you had a 2-2 draw against Parma, a 2-1 victory against Brescia, and then a 2-1 victory against Bologna. And Inter were less than impressive in all 3 of those matches. I mean, a few takeaways right away. 3 matches, Inter scored 6 goals, but they also conceded 4. No clean sheet. And remember, everybody talks about how great Inter is defensively. Statistically, they're not that much better than Dortmund overall. But where I see by Inter, they had luck on their side, specifically against Brescia. Brescia who played them hard. Almost equal in all categories. They opened the scoring with Lautaro Martinez goal that got massively deflected. No chance for the Brescia keeper. And Brescia, I mean, think about it. Brescia, Parma, Bologna. Those are teams that are that are either newly promoted or last season were kind of lower mid-table or looking at least as a possible relegation candidate. And they struggled against them. Bologna, I believe outpossessed them, outshot them, outpassed them, and there they got a last-second penalty to get the win, which was a totally justified. It was a correct call that it was a penalty, but they still barely managed to beat Bologna and Brescia, and again drew against Parma, and were actually down 2-1. So what you see there is with Inter, with Conte, they'll never give up. They'll always play to the last. They'll try anything to win. The category in all 3 of those matches, if I remember correctly, where Inter were by far ahead of their opponent was fouls, especially Bologna. They fouled the hell out of Bologna. And I expect that Conte will employ a tactic which almost would make us think we have Jose Mourinho's Inter Milan coming to the Westfalenstadion this week. I think they'll try to just sit back, play counters, disrupt the play, foul a lot. Negative football is what I expect to see. That doesn't mean they're not going to try to create and go forward and score goals. That's always an opportunity for them, always a possibility. But, and I wouldn't say their form trajectory is down. I'd say it's relatively flat versus Dortmund's is clearly up. It's a great opportunity for Dortmund to come out and win against an Inter side where there aren't questions being asked, but they've been really lucky the last 3 matches, having watched all 3 of them from start to finish. I think Inter's there to be had at the Westfalenstadion. That being said, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be enough for a victory for Dortmund, but Dortmund have significantly better all-around quality, whether it's defending, passing, attacking, than all 3 of those components that Inter faced combined. And playing at home in the Westfalenstadion, I think will play to Dortmund's strengths. That being said, I don't think this is going to be a match where Dortmund's going to shoot a goal 15 times with 10 on target. I think it's one with very few goal-scoring opportunities, and it's down to Dortmund to be clinical. And Handanovic has had a few mistakes here these last few matches, so I think this is a good time to host Inter at the Westfalenstadion for Dortmund, given where both teams are now and looking at the last few matches.
Well, I'm glad to hear. First of all, I have to issue a correction because Dortmund and Inter are on level on points. Both have 4 points to Barcelona 7. I'm sorry. And second of all, Dortmund really need to get their scoring boots on, because if I counted correctly, which I just proved I'm not the best at counting apparently, Dortmund have only scored in 2 games out of the last 8 in the Champions League. So I think out of the last 8, there are 6 games where they failed to score, and to me, that is not very positive. So basically, the malaise started after they pounced Atletico Madrid for nothing, and then it sort of dried up. Then they had another 2-0 win away to Monaco, but after that Tottenham, and then scoreless draw against Barcelona, and so on and so forth. So I really hope that Dortmund can finally rediscover the efficiency. I think in previous Champions League games, obviously it's a little bit harder, but I think Dortmund need to keep doing what they've been doing in the cup and the Bundesliga now, just to have a little bit more connections. So my question to you is, do you think Favre should play the Delaney-Witsel double pivot again? And if so, do you think, because I believe he should, but I also believe he should sub off Witsel in Delaney in the second half and then bring on Weigl or whoever? Or do you think he should just stick with the Weigl-Witsel partnership, which also worked out quite well?
Well, A, what I think will happen, and B, what I think should happen are the same. So I would expect Witsel Delaney as the double pivot also to counteract the physicality of Inter at the center of the pitch, because Weigl is not the most physical person. He's good at retaining the ball under pressure, but he's easy to push off the ball. Delaney is more the quote unquote fighter of the two, and will get stuck in and maybe get under the skin of some of those Inter players, who can sometimes lose their head if provoked in the right way. Especially given they have such a fiery manager on the touchline as well, and that a lot of times will translate into the players' actions as well. So I think Delaney-Witsel is called for in this type of match. Now, if you're not getting anywhere with decisive passing, I agree with you. I think then Weigl would come on. I don't want to see Weigl as a center back partner next to Hummels, because just the pace, I think, will be a problem.
Yeah.
So I agree with... Oh, big time. And yes, people have complained about Akanji, but he won't get beaten for pace. So you definitely need that guy next to Hummels. But if it's a draw or it's tight or whatever, I think, I agree with you. Weigl should come on so you can have a little bit more openness in passing. If you don't want to bring on Weigl, maybe bring in Dahoud next to Witsel. Kind of gives you a little bit of the same thing, but maybe more of an offensive push, and have Witsel drop a little bit deeper in that case. But either way, you get the same overall feeling of playing a decisive pass out of the center of the pitch, against a probably very deep-seating, very defensively oriented Inter side. So, but I do expect Witsel Delaney to start.
So, what Favre did get absolutely right in the first game, was the tactical setup, where he sent Dortmund out in a with back three. I think it was a 3-5-2 formation, or however you want to call it. Changed obviously when you're in possession yourself. Then it's more of a 3-4-3 or whatever. But that's besides the point. Dortmund played with the back three for the first time in a very long time. And I think Favre got a lot of praise for that. So, I wonder if Favre will do the same again to account for what Inter are doing, or do you think he will say, nah, this is our home and we'll just play 4-2-3-1 or whatever?
Well, I mean, he got asked that exact question in the press conference today, and with a smile and a wink, he said it was the right formation when playing in Milan. At home, it's always different. And then he just laughed. So, to me, that indicates he's probably going to play a 4-2-3-1, which Conte is probably banking on. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes 3-4-3. The key thing is, though, your attacking players, I think Sancho, Hazard, Brandt, and Götze or Paco, those are the people you need to throw out there. Obviously, I don't expect to see Reus, given his injury. I don't expect to see Brun Larsen out there because he's not the kind of player that you need against that back line from Inter. Maybe it's a more fluid 4-2-3-1 that can, pivot in different ways, especially because you're going to be dealing with two strikers. So having three center backs can sometimes help. But Favre was also correct in his answer to the reporter that asked him. He's not going to tell you how he's going to play. What do you expect him to go? Oh yeah, totally. I'm going to play exactly like we played last time. And Conte goes, okay, I'll make a note of that. Thank you so much. No. So I personally think it's going to go 4-2-3-1 because Dortmund have really flourished in that in the last two matches. Would I be shocked if he plays a 3-4-3? No. But then you need to play with those more I would rather see Paco up there than Götze because you need that more decisive, I want to score goals type player, in my opinion, against this at times static and not very fast backline, which Julian Brandt also said, we have an advantage when it comes to pace over Inter's defense. And he's correct, but you actually have to do something with that, which they didn't do in Milan.
Yeah, I think Julian Brandt in Milan was one of the most disappointing players. He was just completely misguided, literally by the coach. I would say he looked very out of position and he didn't really know what to do there. So I am glad at the prospect, and I'm looking forward to it, that Julian Brandt will play as a number 10 or more centrally and further down the pitch, which I think will help ask more questions of this Inter backline than Dortmund have asked in the first game, where it was basically only Jadon Sancho who had a couple of good moments, and that was basically it. So I do expect this to change quite dramatically in terms of how much Dortmund will be on the front foot and how much they will create. What we've seen from Dortmund in the first leg was also, again, fullbacks not really working out, but, you know, for Christ's sake, Nico Schulz at some point played as the striker. So, this is something that should not happen. And, I agree with you. You need a number 9 in there. I don't know if I would start Paco right away. I don't know his fitness levels. Maybe give it to Götze and then bring Paco on later on to torment Inter's side. And if I remember correctly, Nima Taveri, who was on here to preview the first game, he basically told us that Inter have a habit to sort of drop off in energy levels quite severely after the 75th minute or so. And, you know, looking at the evidence we have of Dortmund in the last 3 games, Dortmund certainly don't have that drop off. So here's to hope that Dortmund keep their fitness level somewhat up and Inter actually drop off, and maybe we'll see another game where Dortmund can decide it in their favor very late in the game. So I wouldn't bet against that. Let's put it this way. You know, maybe Dortmund decided before that, maybe Inter play like Wolfsburg, but more efficient in front of goal and get 2 goals, and then Dortmund looks stupid. Who knows? Anything can happen because it's the Champions League and it's going to be a very tight affair, and I'm personally just looking forward to it. So, that all being said, who would you play as a fullback or as a wingback?
Yeah, good question. Because obviously, Inter, they don't play with fullbacks plus wingers. They just have those wingbacks. There's pace coming at you, so you want to match that pace. I think, you know, you probably want to put Niko Schulz at left and Hakimi at right back so you can keep up with the pace. I just feel Piszczek will get overrun. I think Guerrero will get overrun at the fullback positions. So those would be the players that I would prefer to have there, personally. But then you also need anybody who's ahead of them as a winger to help back, because then you can force that ball into more central locations where ideally you can overpower Inter in an pressing situation. So I would like to see Schulz and Hakimi as the fullback. I think Schulz will get the start. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Piszczek on the other side.
Now, next question. And I love this question. So, should Dortmund play with the back 3? Should Dortmund play Julian Weigl again in central defense? Or should they play with Akanji, Hummels and Zagadou? Or should they play with Piszczek, Akanji and Hummels?
Well, interesting.
I know,
well,
we have options. We have things to discuss.
Yeah. If they play with a back 3, okay, which I don't think they will, but if, I don't think you would necessarily want to play Weigl, Hummels, and Akanji. I mean, you would probably then have Hummels on the left, Akanji on the right, and Weigl centrally, almost like more like a libero type position. I just feel like you're lacking some pace, unless of course you've got really pacey fullbacks that understand, hey, you're not going to do a lot in attack, but we need you to make sure you do your duties defensively. Piszczek in the back three, I think, is more intriguing because he has a little bit more pace. But again, you know me, I'm not a big fan of fullbacks playing in a center back position because I feel like they naturally drift into their fullback position too often.
For example, played pretty well as a right center half or halfback. Or
I know, but it's been a few seasons since Tuchel. But then if you play Hummels, Zagadou and Akanji, I think you're also missing a little bit of that pace because Zagadou isn't necessarily super pacey. But then you'd probably have to play Hummels in the center in that kind of libero position, which could work. So if he plays a back three, I would probably lean more towards Hummels, Weigl, and Akanji than towards any other variation thereof.
Interesting. I don't know. I might actually play Piszczek instead. I don't know. But I liked Zagadou against Gladbach a lot, but then again, this is the Champions League and it's on another level. No offense to Gladbach, but I feel like Zagadou will have to, be less error prone. And we know he has a lapse here and there, which Piszczek obviously has as well. So I'm a bit torn, and I agree with you. It's probably going to be a back four. So this entire exercise we just made is for naught, but it's still fun to talk about. Though if we would play with Zagadou, the thing is he can dribble forward better, I would say, than Piszczek. And you would have the advantage of having Hummels at the center, which I like better than having Weigl at the center. So in that scenario, this is maybe my main argument for why you would play Zagadou, Akanji, and Hummels, just because you have Hummels then really in the center where he can maybe do the most damage. I don't know. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game tactically, and I cannot wait to see the lineup at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah. I don't know. Should we move on to predictions, or are there any team news from Inter that you can maybe report? Because I so far haven't seen anything.
Nothing per se pops to mind right now. I think we could just move along to the predictions. What do you think? How do you think it's going to end up?
Well, I actually think that Dortmund will win this 3-1. I'm quite optimistic about this game now, and it might bite me in the ass. So if we mention one injury at Inter, Alexis Sanchez is obviously still out, but Stefano Sensi is also ruled out, and I think he is the most important player for Inter. So I actually expect the same lineup that Inter played in the same way as they played in the first leg. So I don't see a lot of changes there, but I do think Dortmund will be a different team. So there we are. So 3-1 Dortmund is my prediction. I think they will turn it up again, and also because they really have to win this game. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm also optimistic. I may not be as optimistic as you. I don't know if I'm 3 goals optimistic. I do believe Inter will concede. That seems to be a thing they've been doing a lot lately. You can't forget, before the Dortmund match, they conceded 3 against Sassuolo, so they haven't kept a clean sheet in a while. They've found it again. They've found that confidence in putting the ball where it needs to be, including the back of the net. I think Dortmund will win. I think Dortmund will jump out to a 2-0 lead, and then I think Lukaku will poach one back. It'll be 2-1, and then really nervy final 10-15 minutes. But again, then Dortmund will just have more in the tank than Inter to do much more about it. I don't think they'll be quite as naive in their attacking approach as they were in Milan, where they were kind of chasing the result at the end. So I think a 2-1 victory for Dortmund is definitely a realistic prediction.
Yeah, I think 3-1 is also a realistic prediction, to be honest. I also think we will see a better Jadon Sancho. I don't know if he'll start or as a sub, but I think he will perform much better than in recent weeks. I think because Dortmund have more synergy, and I think this will help him overall because the construct just looks a little bit better. So I just hope Dortmund can tack on what they've shown in the previous games. Yes, it wasn't all perfect, far from it again, But, there's some positivity there, and I hope they can cling on and take this Spielfreude, as we like to call it, and also show it against Inter, because I don't know about you, but I really feel like if you really go berserk like Dortmund did in the 20 to 25 minutes against Wolfsburg, I think something similar can happen to Inter, that they just try to defend and don't really have an answer. I feel like they can also come under a lot of pressure and then struggle to deal with it. I don't know, you watch them more, but I just feel like this is a team that's predestined for that sort of situation as well.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. So I guess that's it. And we can now tell our listeners how they can tweet at us on the internet. Matthias, I will go first because I think it's now for you to do the outro. So you can find me at Stefan Butzko. Thank you very much for listening to episode 300. And Matthias, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks for that. You can find me on Twitter at Matthias Hug. You can find all of us at Yellowwallpod. You can also find us at Yellowwallpod on Facebook. You can find the podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, you can find it there. Also go to Yellowwallpod, or was it Yellowwall.net? Theyellowwall.net, to find the written content there as well. We appreciate all the support also on Patreon. There's just Yellowwallpod. And really quickly want to say a big thank you. It's been 300 episodes. Feels like, yes, it's been already over 7 years, but it was a quick 7 years since starting this podcast in my basement in Colorado. I'm now recording this upstairs where the sun shines, so we've definitely moved up in the world in the last 7 years. So humbly thank all of you for listening and supporting us, whether that's on Patreon, whether that's following us, whether that's just giving us feedback and comments and so on. And also thank you to Borussia Dortmund as a club for being supportive over the years. And Stefan, of course, thank you for doing the biggest bulk of the work over the last years. So it's been an absolute joy, and I look forward to the next 300 episodes of the Yellow Wall. And I will let you say goodbye to people then.
Goodbye. No, honestly, I also appreciate everyone out there sharing this episode. And of course, we do need sponsors. So if you want to have a shout out to your fan club or whatnot, go to patreon.com/theyellowwall. And then you can see the tier where you can sponsor an episode. I think it's $10. And that obviously helps. And if you want to subscribe to our written content, which is mostly behind the yellow paywall, then it will cost you $1 a month, which I hope you all can afford, which then goes mostly to my healthcare. But I think that's justified since I do, as you just said, do the bulk of the work. So again, everyone who's already contributing, thank you very much. It helps me a lot to get ahead in life. So moving to America was a dangerous decision, as we all know. So thank you for that. And we shall be back on Thursday or early Friday, depending from where you're listening, with the Bayern preview. And of course, we will have, I think, loads to discuss from that Inter game. So I'm looking forward to that 301st episode already. And with that, as always, thank you for listening and goodbye.